Well, I love Louis Del Mar. Let's do a kick-ass radio interview. Danny and Max from the band, thank you so much for joining us today.
How's it going, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. I feel bad that you came on a pretty gloomy Twin Cities afternoon.
It's nice. We like rain.
It's relaxing.
How does it rain often in New York City, where you're from?
No
more than
I mean, the weather is awful in New York, generally, but we live like right on the coast, so when there's storms there, it gets really crazy, and the sky gets like super dark, and there's crazy wind all the time.
That's true.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, actually.
What part of New York are you from again?
We live in Rockaway Beach, New York, which is in Queens.
Queens, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
It's right by JFK.
Is there a big rivalry with all the boroughs in New York? Like here in the Twin Cities, it's like St. Paul and Minneapolis. Like we like each other, but we also don't like each other sometimes, which is weird. But
we're originally from DC, and I think in that regard, there's some like rivalries between like the different areas. They call it the DMV. It's like DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I think there are some rivalries there between the boroughs. I don't think so. I've never between the boroughs. I don't really think so.
Okay, cool.
Not
Could
really.
Be wrong. Could be wrong.
I'm not saying there should be or there is. It's just not being a New Yorker.
There's obviously the Yankees and the Mets, and those are from different boroughs. But
do you remember when they were both in the World Series? Like what was that? Like 10, 15 years ago or something? The Subway Series.
It must have been way more than that. No.
Was it like 1999, 2000, something? I don't remember.
I don't think I could tell you one thing about baseball, so I apologize.
Are you a sports fan at all? Do you like any like basketball?
I like watching the World Cup.
World Cup's cool.
That's where it starts.
Yeah. So every 4 years you get your
Redskins fans. We're Redskins fans too.
Oh, are you? Okay, cool. Yeah, you just franchised
true.
what's his name, Cousins. So
that's it.
We'll see what happens there.
Captain Kirk.
Well, it's great to have you guys here. One thing I've heard about you, I haven't seen Louis Del Mar live yet. As we record this interview, you're performing tonight with Borns.
We are, yeah.
Sold out show at First Avenue. I will be there.
You will be there.
You go on at 7:10.
We do.
7:15.
You know more than we do.
I'm fired up. As you can tell, I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be good. But
that's an early one. 7:15. That's pre-dinner time.
Yeah, curfew's like 9:30 tonight. So
that's weird.
Plenty of time to go out this evening. It'll be good. Well, you're playing Lollapalooza coming up as well, right?
We are absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, you got to be fired up for that.
It'll probably be the biggest show we do this summer, yes.
Which night are you playing? You're playing Friday night?
Friday afternoon, yeah.
It's a great lineup, too.
It's a really great lineup. Radiohead's the headliner on the day that we play.
So of course, you'll be watching Radiohead.
We will, yeah. I think that every band, it feels like every band in the world is playing Lollapalooza. There's got to be like 200 bands on that lineup.
Yeah, it's insane. And they expanded to 4 days this year. Mm-hmm. And just to think where they came, I mean, I think it was just one day. I mean, it used to be a tour, and then it was like one day, I think, at Grant Park in Chicago, and expanded 2 days, 3 days, and now 4. So
I just had like no idea that the festival was owned and started by the guy that fronts Jane's Addiction.
Perry Farrell, legend.
That is like, I can't even like keep clean underwear while we're on the road. And that guy like was a frontman of a band and runs like the biggest festival in the world. That's completely insane. Crazy to me.
I went to Lollapalooza a couple years ago, and there was the night before the festival starts, they do a kind of like a gala get together with some radio people and the festival organizers and whatnot. And Perry Farrell was like 5 feet away from me. I've never met him. I've never interviewed him or anything. And I'm not like the biggest Jane's Addiction fan in the world. I love their first 2 records quite a bit, but I'm not like a super fan. But you look at Perry Farrell and you're like, I don't know what alternative music would be without him. I mean, some of the influences that he's, sort of started with bands, and just you think about like the late 80s when he came out, there wasn't alternative radio. I mean, bands like R.E.M. and Jane's Addiction and the Pixies, he was a part of that movement and helped stations like this exist. So
that's really cool.
It's kind of cool. I'm sorry for the tangent. I get it.
No, not at all.
Well, tell me about some of your influences, though. I mean, growing up in New York City, I imagine like hip hop was a big part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we as I say, we grew up in New York. So we moved to New York about 3 years. We grew up in DC. So we moved to New York about 3 years ago. So really the influences that we sort of like shared growing up in DC were more sort of like of the Discord Records variety. And Fugazi Repeater was one of the first albums we bonded over. A lot of like punk and ska stuff. And yeah, that's kind of, I think the first song we ever played was like Sleep Now in the Fire by Rage Against the Machine. But we used to just like fangirl over like all sorts of just like
really small punk bands that we thought were like, oh, these guys are gods. There's like 30 people in the room watching them play.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about that scene, the hardcore scene, the punk scene, those bands only get so big just by the nature of the amount of fans they have and all that. But they're super dedicated, and they can tour the world, and they can play shows anywhere. So it's a DIY approach, which I've always respected, Discord and all that. So, and
there were really beautiful communities that surrounded them, which is something that seems to have sort of like fractured over the years. I think the internet is able to bring together like kind of subcultures of people that are in different parts of the world, but that idea of all being in the same city and all like really wanting to in some ways play a similar style of music, it's not lost completely, but it's something that like we never really had. I don't know if it's just because
of change as we grew up. I feel like a lot.
Yeah. And now even, I mean, part of the reason why we live in Rockaway, frankly, is because when we originally moved to New York, we were living in Brooklyn and we felt sort of like the scenes that were occurring there, and there's plenty of them, weren't anything that we totally fit into with our style and what we were trying to create. So part of the reason why we left there was to sort of separate ourselves a little bit and also just try to come from a place that was really unique. I mean, Max and I's entire goal is to make the music that only the two of us can make. And I think that somehow, I'm sure it was always the goal of certain artists at different periods of time. But that idea of having like an artist community is something really beautiful that I feel like we've sort of never partaken in.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
How long have you been making music together, and how did you decide to sort of create the sound that you have?
We started making music together when we were like 11 or 12 years old. Yeah, we've like grown up playing together. So we've gone through like several different incarnations of projects, punk bands, rock bands, this and that. And this project, we just like, I don't know, it's sort of like what Dan said, getting back to like the core of who we were as artists. And we started self-recording everything and writing together. And this is the project that emerged out of that.
I hear so much from people who have seen you live is just how incredible you are. No pressure tonight or anything. But I mean, obviously, anytime you're in a band or an artist, you want to perform well, certainly. So it's might be a silly question, but how important was that for you to have a great live show, and what's your approach to that?
It's extremely important. And I think sort of as you were sort of referencing a minute ago, that like DIY ethos is something that Max and I like grew up on. And before this ever existed, we were in a station wagon for years, just like putting the pieces of the puzzle together with this other group we were touring with. And we were doing everything on our own. And that was just like 150 to 200 shows a year, playing in like basements and like small parties. And so like the idea and the notion of playing live music in a band with your friends is like the basis of so much of our art. So in some ways, having a formidable live performance is everything to us.
Yeah.
And when we were kind of putting the pieces in place to make that happen, never once was there even the slightest consideration of like having computers on stage or it just being the two of us with a bunch of backing tracks. To us, there's so much nuance that gets lost when you do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that every night, I mean, whether it's, with Borns or with another artist we're opening for or at our own show, those are just different environments every single evening. And when you are a group of individuals playing all of your instruments live, which it sucks that I even have to say that as a foreign concept now, is you're able to mold that experience every single evening to the people that are in front of you. There's never going to be something about it that's completely the same. And so that's just really important to us. I mean, it's more fun.
It's just like, it's also just what we know. Like we grew up playing in bands. Like before we were like recording and producing stuff, we were just dudes in a basement with instruments.
And you're at this point now where, and I really appreciate you talking about all this because I think this generation we live in now, and I'm guilty of it as well, the social media sort of generation where instant gratification, we want what we want now. Sometimes you don't want to work for it. And we have all these bands and artists that, they want to get on the radio. They want to play to big audiences and shows. And you guys have been making music for 10 years. For a casual Go 96.3 listener, Louis Del Mar's a brand new band. The song Loudy is a brand new song, but you've been playing hundreds and hundreds of shows. When the Beatles came to the States in the 60s, they had already played like 2,000 shows before they even got here.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, totally.
I think it's really important to just stress that, working hard and kind of honing your craft before you really present it to people is important.
Oh, of course. And that was true of the recordings as well. When we first moved to New York, we were recording and writing just day in and day out for about at least 2.5 years before we showed the music to anybody.
No, and it's true. I think it's the kind of thing that in the end, there's sort of no substitute for. And I think that all you can really hope for, and when people talk about luck being this like, confluence of like preparation and whatever it is, timing or opportunity, I think that we were very fortunate in that sense to when this band, as Louis Del Mar played its first performance, it was a good show because we'd been playing for a long time and we'd built up these ideas and sort of strategies that made for a good live performance. So when only a couple months after that we went to South by, which is how we garnered a lot of the festival slots that we're playing on this summer. We were bringing a good show to the table, which had this been 2 years ago, we would not have been able to do 3 years ago, whatever it is.
And it doesn't hurt that you have a lot of great songs to play. And I'm not just saying that to kiss up to you, but it's true. I mean, you got some great records. We play Loudy quite a bit. That's how you say it, right? Loudy?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it? I've always been confused
like.
with the loud and like the apostrophe. But this is a record you guys made in like a bedroom or your basement, right?
Yeah.
And then it gets on Hype Machine and it's getting some attention. And now it's this song that you made in your room is now on the radio and you're doing Lollapalooza. I mean,
insane.
when you hear that record on an alternative channel like this, what are you thinking?
We heard it for the first time together in the car when we were in LA, I think.
Yeah.
And it was completely surreal because it very literally, with no exaggeration, was recorded entirely in Max's bedroom. And I cut the vocals for it in the closet in Max's bedroom. And I think that to like sort of come full circle with this whole idea, I think a lot of the reason why you have some new artists coming up, not all by any stretch of the imagination, that aren't necessarily performing live as we were discussing it, is because there is that internet culture of recorded music and anybody really can record music. And so there's a whole other generation of people that are coming up that are beginning their music careers in their bedrooms like that. And so for us, it was like sort of new territory.
Right.
And I think that to have that finished product come out of that environment is completely crazy for us.
Yeah, it's really mind-blowing. And it's not to say that we don't appreciate, I mean, like the types of innovation that can come out of those circumstances in terms of like people are creating really cool stuff because now the tools are there and readily available for them to do like whatever they want. But it's always been a balance of like the traditional live music and sort of like creative recording for us.
Totally.
Playing the main room at First Avenue tonight, sold out show. Biggest difference between a show like this, maybe opening for an artist, or just playing in a club or a venue like that versus playing on a big stage at a Lollapalooza or a Austin City Limits, whatever you might be doing down the line. What's the biggest difference for you? Have you had enough experience with that to even?
I think what we're playing tonight, I would still consider a big stage.
Yeah,
it's huge, legendary stage.
It's a legendary stage.
Yeah.
We actually covered Prince for a long time in another group that we played in, and it's a total honor and privilege to be able to come and do something like this. It's the kind of thing that you literally dream about when you're growing up. I think, I don't think we've had enough big festival experience to really say, but I think that it's sort of a different environment there, in my opinion. When you're on stage in a club, there can be this like really electric energy that gets sort of like, that can kind of pulse through the crowd, and you're really in touch with it when you're on stage.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a festival environment, what I think is that there's a lot of people that are really there to enjoy themselves. It's slightly of a less critical environment. People are happy to be outdoors.
Right.
People are happy to be in good weather, to be enjoying music, whether it's a band that they want to see or just the fact that they're there. And so I don't want to say it's easier to win them over, but perhaps it's, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I like, my interpretation is slightly different.
It's a lighter show.
There's more of a mindset to discover music as a festival goer too, so maybe that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're at a club,
you feel like you have the burden of proof or something. Like
something like that.
Yeah. For me, when you ask that question, the only thing I think about is just the fact that like, I still love playing like 250 capacity rock clubs where it's just like sweaty and packed. And the stage being smaller is almost kind of cooler because you're just jam-packed with the rest of the band. You can hear everything like really easily, and you just feel the crowd right there. It just feels more like punk rock to me.
Yeah. No, we love shows like that.
This might be a tough question, and I get it a lot, and I have a tough time answering just because there's so much music out there. But when you're on the road, driving around, what have you been listening to lately?
Tons of stuff. Man, we listen to...
I've been listening to a lot of Wilco, which I just feel like it's just like good Midwest driving music, but also like just really cool creative recordings. I mean, that's nothing new, but
yeah, no, we've listened to a lot of Wilco. Max showed me the new Avalanches record recently. That's really cool.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, that's a cool record.
We actually just put together a playlist on Spotify that we're going to launch, I think, tomorrow or Thursday, with a bunch of stuff we've been listening to driving. So I'm trying to think what else is on it. When we were over in the UK, we picked up a bunch of artists too that we really like. This guy, Tom Misch,
Yeah, I know Tom Misch. Yeah, sure.
He's great. But we also listen to like a lot of like books on tape and comedy because I think after a while there's like some monotony with the music. So we're listening to a bunch of David Foster Wallace stuff and what else?
Just like stand up. I don't.
Lots of stand up. Yeah, those are the go-tos in the van though, I think.
One thing I wanted to bring up too before I get you guys out of here, and I'll leave you on this. We had an artist here a couple days ago by the name of John Bellion.
Oh yeah.
He wrote Monster for Eminem and Rihanna. Wrote some songs with Jason Derulo and has his own record out now. It's kind of blowing up. I think he's going to be a pretty big deal. But I was speaking with him and he described his music as a mixture between Pixar and Jay Dilla. And Jay Dilla is one of my favorite artists of all time, and that kind of inspired me to kind of go back and listen to some of his old records again. And in preparation for this interview and listening to some of your music, I'm like, I feel like maybe it's just from that interview from last week got me thinking about it, but I hear some of his music and your stuff too. Would that be fair to say?
110% as like a producer.
Nailed it.
As a producer and a drummer. Just a huge influence on this project, and combining some of those like sampling techniques with kind of like folk and pop and rock music. I think it's just like very fundamental to what we're doing.
Yeah. We were just in Detroit the other day, and it was just like one of those things. It was just cool to even play a show there. That's where Dilla's from.
Sure.
And so yeah, absolutely. He's as big of an influence as
we
any.
actually play as our walk-on song every single night for every show is You Love.
Really?
Yeah.
I swear to God, I didn't know any of this. I was just like thinking about it. Like it kind of has a little bit of a similar influence.
That's really cool. I'm glad you picked that up on your own.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Good stuff. And listen,
you'll hear it tonight.
Having it be 2016, is that the right grammar? Having it be 2016, whatever. It's 2016 and a lot of music's been done already. A lot of sounds have been made, and to come across a band who are doing something different, unique, and innovative, it's refreshing to come across that. So thank you both for doing that, and
thank you for supporting it.
Keep the music coming. I need good music to play on the radio, so
right
it goes
on.
both ways.
That means
we
a lot.
really appreciate you having us here.
Danny and Max, Louis Del Mar, thank you.
Cheers. Thanks.